Welcome back to another pen talk. Thanks for tuning in. The journey continues, and yes, I got two PenBBS 494s. They're low-end Piston Filler pen. And I got two because the price was under $4. Here's the eBay auction. They seem to be readily available, and they come in pretty much generic packaging, but they do come in packaging. I mean, normally at this price, you're not going to get any type of packaging. You're just going to get a plastic sleeve, which it does come in a plastic sleeve, and I've taken plastic sleeve off of this one. So let's reveal the pen. So the first thing you'll notice is it has that 78G kind of look. Obviously that cap finial, phenomenally stiff clip, a very nice transparent plastic, all injection molded, clear feed, you know, and the piston works nice, is what you would expect. And it does click in place, which is nice. We're going to take it apart and look at that a little bit closer later on in the video. But I mean, it's a $4 pen. Is it worth $4? Does the PenBBS name mean something? There's no branding on the pen. The cap takes, a lot of turns to get off, almost 3 turns, but definitely over 2.5 turns. And you see a nib, which is marked F for fine, and it does have some labeling there. Let's bring in the lights and look at it more closely. So I don't know what the logo in the middle represents, but the top says Marshmallow, Shanghai. Well, Shanghai is definitely used to identify a lot of PenBBS pens, but that's the first time I've seen Marshmallow used. I'll see if Google Translate can make anything out of those characters. It's your standard nice nib, your standard nice feed. It's a pilot style nib. You can see those wings there that fit into the little grooves on the feed. So, you know, that's it. We're going to compare this to some other pens and obviously take it apart and ink it up, and we'll see how these fine and extra fine nibs are right. I took the 494 apart, and I think it's interesting. I think one of the key things to look at is the bits and pieces that they put together to make this pen. You know, this is your standard 78G cap. You know, the clip is held on by this finial, which is screwed into threads at the top of the cap. Yeah, there's some facets there to give it some look, or also maybe to strengthen it a little bit, because these can break. Those threads there are design weak point, whatever, depending upon how well it's molded and the quality of the resins that's used in the injection molding. Could be a weak point. You know, one piece of barrel, not unusual for this type of pen. And you have facets here, which I guess kind of, you know, mimic the ones in the top of the cap, but not very much. And there's a nice O-ring there, which you've seen before. You know, it's clear. You know, the quality of the injection molding is definitely improved in the pens that are now coming out. And we are paying a few more dollars, but $1 for a fountain pen delivered is pretty ridiculously low price. So this is under $4, so they have to do something. The clear feed, which we've seen a lot before. I think the 698 Wing Sung was the first one that I remember seeing that in. To me, one of the things that's a first in this pen is the nib is that pilot design nib with those wings at the back that fit into a slot in the feed. So it definitely is going to be in the feed in one spot. And nice logo there. And it's labeled F for fine. At least one thing that's good about PenBBS is they seem to be consistent in labeling their nibs, sometimes a little bit artistically. And then we get to the heart of the matter, which is this piston filler. It took a little bit of effort to unscrew this from the back of the cap. I'm not going to take the whole thing apart because to me, in order to clean it, this is all you need. You know, you could take this all out, silicone grease, anything. The one thing that's nice is this does snap when it's all the way up. And they injection molded a little step there in the threads of that screw. So, you know, that's an interesting bit of engineering. I mean, the whole thing works well. This is that same piston filler we've seen in hundreds of pens. You know, it has two rings on it. You know, I'll silicone grease everything and make certain that it runs well when I put the pen back together. Yes, the comparison. So here we have the two PenBBS 494s, one inked up, one not inked. And the pen that most closely compares to is this Wingsung piston pen, which I can only find being sold by Bobby. Then I have up here the other PenBBS low-end pen, the 322, which I had two. I gave one away. Some people like the nib, didn't turn me on. And here for comparison is a Pilot 78G, which I'm assuming is a real one, but it's hard to tell nowadays. There are so many models knocking around. And at the very top for comparison is a Wingsung 3001, which is basically the same cap design, but, you know, it's a cartridge converter versus a piston filler. So all of these have in common that same cap finial that screws on and that holds the clip in place. Different style clips between these. They're all functional clips, you know. The Wingsungs and the Pilot share these painted on bands, which to me don't really hold up over time. So you're going to get some wear there, especially, you know, if you use the pen a lot, in and out of your pocket, in and out of a pen sleeve, in and out of your, you know, notebook, whatever you're going to use for it. These three are all about the same length, and as they put in a piston filler, the length got a little bit longer to accommodate all of that. So let's dive in a little deeper. Here's the Wingsung, which I think most closely resembles the PenBBS model. In fact, they may be pretty much the same model. The caps are interchangeable. They take about the same number of turns to get off. You know, they both have that Pilot style nib. They both have this O-ring at the bottom, transparent feed. Doing one inked up, which is the Wingsung version, and one uninked. The Wingsung version has gold plated trim, which makes it a little bit different, but the filling mechanism is identical between the two pens. So it's hard to really say where this design came from. I would want to give credit to PenBBS. I think they worked with the factory making these pens for Wingsung, and they said, let's make one for me. And the factory made a few extra that branded as Wingsung, or at least attempted to do a Wingsung brand. Yeah, the nibs are similar, different, obviously, markings on them. But we'll see when we do the writing sample how they compare there. So I mentioned how these painted on bands wear over time. You know, 78G, whatever. These may be a little bit less permanent on this Wingsung, but they're certainly, to me, not something you'd want on a quality pen. And just for comparison's sake, here's that Wingsung 3001. Again, same cap principle, same finial here at the top of the cap, same Pilot style nib in there. This is the cartridge converter model, which more mimics the 78G in length. You know, no O-ring on the cap there, gold trim, you know, your same Pilot style nib. And an extra fine Wingsung nib, which is not my favorite, just like the extra fine on the 78G is not my favorite. So here we have the earlier version of an inexpensive pen by PenBBS. Down here is that 322 model. Above it is the 494. They put a piston filler in it. Again, the length is a little bit longer. You know, this one is more closely related to a 78G. And as we take off the caps, similar amount of turns to get them off. We'll see that the nibs are the same nibs. So those that like the nibs on the 322 but wanted a piston filler, you can go to this 494 clear feed. So that's one of the changes between these two models. And of course that O-ring here, but that was on the Wing Sung version of this. So, which one do you like the most? Here we show the two models posted, and there's a substantial length difference. So if you're into a longer pen posted, the 494, the piston version, certainly gives you that. And this is a good example of how they've shaped the barrel and shaped the inside of the cap. The threads on the 332 are much higher in the cap here, so that would tend to allow the cap to post more deeply than it would on the 494. But again, more similarities and dissimilarities, and most of the differences are because of the piston filler. So what ink to go with? I decided to go with this ink because I wanted some nice intense blue. You know, my 100 milliliter bottle is down to probably, looks like, less than 30 milliliters. I enjoy this ink, and I've also shared it with a few friends. This pen is very light. It will give you those weights. I mean, you really don't feel it in your hand at all. It's fine posted. You know, it's long enough to be used, and you can see it post securely. It's long enough to be used unposted. During writing samples, I generally do unposted because I'll hit the tripod that I'm writing over. The other thing that gives me a challenge is there are little flat spots at 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock on this section. You know, kind of like to keep your fingers in the right spot, but I don't need those, and I like to be able to move my fingers around, as I've mentioned many times before. This is about as slight a flat spot as you can get, so I learned to live with it. I had the microphone next to the nib, and hopefully you can hear it. The nib is very smooth. And yes, it is sensitive to pressure. I just had a recent viewer talk to me about their 456 being sensitive to pressure, and I've noticed that more often recently. So maybe I'm not using as much pressure as I used to. A number of people used to mention that I would flex nibs too much, but that's what I do. But this nib does not respond to pressure at all. Yeah, you'll get a little bit more ink flow, but certainly that line width doesn't change. So I talked about writing with the extra fine, and I'm just going to show you some examples from eBay of the fine and extra fine nibs side by side. I have no desire to ink up the extra fine nib. It'll probably find a new home in the near future. So let me rate this pen the old-fashioned way. And I'm going to give it a 7.4. I mean, it just doesn't do anything for me. On the only level that it appeals to me is a $4 piston filler that's made fairly well, works fairly well. I'm not a fan of this nib. I don't give it any checks. It's made well. Yeah, 3 turns almost to get the cap off is a bit much. They could have obviously done some retooling, but I don't think they wanted to do that. They wanted to take an existing pen, put their nib on it, their marshmallow nib on it, and sell it at a reasonable price. In order to do that, you really can't afford to do a retooling or other things that might have made some, to me, engineering and design changes of this pen that to me would have made it more of a nice writer. So now we're going to go to the ranking sheet. Design, just 1 check. Engineering, 1 check. Build, 2 checks. It's put together very well. Writing is 1.5. It does write well. And you'll notice this fine nib works good on this cheap copy paper. The look, I'll also give it 2 checks. I mean, it looks okay. And for value, it gets 2 checks. So, to the criteria that I put a lot of weight on are only 1 checks, and look only gets 2 checks, and writing 1.5, so that merits a 7.4. So you may ask, how does the Wing Sung write? Better. But those of you that watch my video may know that this is a medium nib supplied by Bobby and not the original extra fine or fine nib that this pen came with originally. There's that M. So you really can't compare this nib to the other nib. And the other thing is that both of these pens sometimes can be ink starved. They're pens that need to be written with every day. And if you don't write with them, at least with this type of piston, as you can see, that piston's down over half of the way because I do resaturate the feed fairly regularly. And if I don't resaturate the feed, the pen will write dry. I haven't written multiple pages with this, as I mentioned that section, and this section on the Wing Sung is exactly the same as the one on the PenBBS pen, which further confirms that they use the same tooling to make the pens. And this also comes in silver trim like the PenBBS does, so that even doesn't distinguish them. This is the lowest ranked PenBBS pen I've ever reviewed. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you have better pen experiences and enjoy your nibs more than I've enjoyed the nib on this pen. And to me, that's an important part. You need to enjoy your nib. So we've reached the end of this video. Some of you may like this nib, and it is good if you're going to be writing on cheap paper, so it does have its uses. It's not something that I'm fond of. So may you have great writing experiences and explore this wonderful world of pens and use one of them or many of them to put ink on paper. So we're going to say bye for now. Have a wonderful day and a great life.